What is up, everybody? Episode 51 of the Patio Slave podcast. But you knew that because you clicked on this and you're here. It's Anthony. What's going on, fellas? Nate and Tony. You guys doing good?
Yeah, man.
I'm super excited. We got something super special tonight.
Got something up our sleeves?
Yeah, we do.
I don't think I'm ready for this.
You better be.
So before we get into all that goodness, you know the rules here. Like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. We're on social media. Everyone is. I think the only thing we're not on at this point is TikTok, and maybe some point down the road.
Yet.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But at Patio Slave on Twitter and Instagram. And then email is patioslavepodcast@gmail.com. We love emails. We say that. I think we say that every week, but there's nothing better than just like real mail. Just like I like getting packages. I like getting mail. Mm-hmm. Email's the same way. So what's going on, guys?
I agree. Emails like the Amazon package that shows up on your doorstep. You're like, oh, I'm so happy that someone cares, like the sweet.
It's like the extra effort. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Can't wait to dig into that nerdery. It could be a record. It could be somebody emailing us saying, yeah, I liked your conversation about, the Foo Fighters last week, or 2 weeks ago. Yeah, absolutely. So we have something special for you guys tonight. We do have a couple set list items we'll get to first, but the special project here is a day in the life of a college radio metal director. One of our own, Anthony, was a college radio metal director.
So
roughly, 14 years ago, I think, since you left your post, 2003 to 2007 at his college. So he's hinted about it off and on throughout the life of the pod over the last year. We wanted to ask him questions, kind of turn the camera inward and ask him a bunch of questions about how that came about and, how he cut his teeth on the radio there. And that led to, bigger and better things, namely the Patio Slave podcast. So yeah, we got questions for Anthony coming up in our main segment tonight.
And I get stories. I get stuff to share here. I got deep, dark secrets of the radio industry. No, not really.
I'm sure you do.
But I'm actually excited for this, and I was jogging my memory earlier today about things that if you don't ask, I want to make sure I bring up. So we'll get into that.
Yeah, I'm interested in just get a snapshot of that time frame. I think we little mini pre-show, not a whole lot. We didn't spill too many beans, but it was definitely a certain era that is reminiscent of the times. So that's cool.
And I mean, we've gotten little glimpses here and there. I mean, talking to Maddie Arsenal back on episode 39, talking even a couple weeks ago, you brought up talking to one of the members of Earth Crisis, I think. So yeah, there's some stuff there. I wanted to dig a little deeper, so we're gonna do that tonight.
Yeah, and even we talked about it with Jason Tate a little bit. It came out there.
Oh yeah.
So I think before we get into that, we're gonna hit some current event stuff. Who broke up? Who's calling it quits?
The robots, man. The robots. Daft Punk.
Did we call this of like who's gonna survive the pandemic? Were they on our radar? No,
they weren't on our radar. Now, the thing is, they haven't put a record out in 7-something years. So did they retire in 2013 or 14? Who knows, right? But they did announce, this is you're hearing this about a week after they announced that they were done. They're no longer. And they did it in semi-epic fashion on YouTube with a video called Epilogue. It was about 7.5 minutes long, which is about 6 minutes too long, probably. I don't know if you guys watched it, but damn. Yeah, they're done.
So are they the Dustin Pedroia of music? Like they were just like lingering for the last decade, and then they're like making a big deal of retirement.
I mean, they had done some stuff with The Weeknd 4 years ago on Starboy, and I Feel It Coming, and I mean
That's right.
Had a big Grammy performance around that too, if I remember correctly. So they were still doing stuff, but they weren't making a record, which people were clamoring for. So I think, when did Ram come out? I think it was 13 or 14. And they had been on a cycle where they put a record out and then they went and toured on it, like Alive 1997. Then they did the same thing. They put a couple records out and then they toured in 2007. And then the hope was they were going to tour in 2017. Obviously that didn't happen. They've just kind of done some bit spots here and there, and then now they're done. So I hope it's fake because I'm a fan, but I don't know. I mean, maybe they're through. Maybe the robots are no more.
I think it's real because they made an announcement previously, I don't know, 4 years ago, that they were going to cease from touring, right? So that was an announcement at some point. But also, it's just such like a, I don't know, reverse psychology sucker punch. It's like they're the robots. The robots are retiring in 2021. Doesn't really add up. Doesn't make any sense.
I'm trying to think of like, all right, so if you're a band and you're calling it quits, there's two angles, or there's probably more than two angles, but there's a couple angles you can take. You can make an announcement like this, and you have this, hey, this is the end of it, hurrah thing, or you stay silent and you keep the door open. And I'm just trying to think of, if I was in their shoes, what I would do, because the way they went out now, it's this big hurrah. They get the spike from streaming, which you mentioned in pre-show, Tony.
They got a spike too. I have a number for you if you want it.
Oh, well, yeah, I'll definitely.
So go ahead, finish your thought.
So the spike from that, but then also if they come back, it'll be bigger than it would have otherwise. Like if they didn't call it quits and then put out their next album cycle. So I think it's a win-win.
Yeah. Their spike from streaming was roughly 1 million from yesterday to today when I looked at it. So like I said, I think we were texting about it when it popped up yesterday. It's like, why do this? And then my thought is, it's almost like, not to be too morbid, it's almost like a death. When someone dies in the music industry, people flock to that music. So if you say, hey, our band is dead, people are going to, I thought about throwing stuff on yesterday. I'm sure a lot more people did, because their monthly streaming numbers went up almost 1 million people on Spotify, which means it did everywhere, right? It wasn't just Spotify. It was YouTube Music. It was Apple Music, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a good way to flourish in the streaming world nowadays. If you're going to call it quits and you're a big enough band that you're going to get a couple bucks out of saying it, you say it.
I would hate for it to be that reason where they're retiring and then coming back again, like you said, Twan, like that cash grab on the back half. It's like Motley Crue did that, Kiss did that. I mean, any band that does that and comes back once, twice, 3 times, it's just annoying. As a nerd, it's just like, you got to just like be true to it. You can't just like, fuck with the crowd like that. So I don't think that's the case with this band. I don't think so, but who knows?
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. Just because if they were going the cash grab route, they would have, I think, continuously pumped out music the whole way. But it reminds me of the Jay-Z retiring thing we spoke about a few weeks ago, where he was going to release an album under, his actual name. I mean, Daft Punk, what are they going to come out with, like D-Punk, under a different name?
Or their own names. I think it's Thomas Bangalter and Guy DeHomem, Manuel DeHomem Cristo or something. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many angles. I mean, it could be literally like they have an album contract where they're like, you have to fulfill this or you have to retire. And they're like, oh, we're going to retire then. Fuck this. We're out. Mic drop kind of thing.
It could be, hey, we've been home for a year. And again, I don't know if they were touring or not, but like the whole pandemic thing, it might have worked in the, maybe the different direction that I would have thought, which is, hey, we like being home. We like the quiet life. Maybe this is for us.
They have plenty of money. I mean,
yeah.
And their music is timeless enough to the people that love it that it will continue to reap the benefits of streaming for years to come. Like, they'll still make money as a streaming act for a long time. And I wouldn't be shocked to see them down the road producing here and there, throwing their name behind some of that stuff. So you could see more and more of that. So I think I'm going to segue into somebody else who likes to produce other people's records and started a CBD line and has 1 million people on his new band's record coming up. Who am I talking about?
And who's also dating someone who's massively famous?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Nate, who's Tone talking about?
The one and only Travis Barker.
He's conquering the world, apparently.
Yeah, he's hitting all cylinders. Album with special guests, like you said. It's the new Blink album, one.
Yeah, new Blink
album. New Blink album.
Little Uzi Vert, Grimes, Pharrell. Those are all rumored to be on the new Blink album coming up.
No Tom DeLonge, huh?
I mean, they're probably keeping that under their hat, right? We called that. It's going to happen. We're hoping. We're holding out hope.
Yeah, we had insider knowledge that may have suggested that. But no, and he was on the MGK record that came out. We talked about that a few months ago. He's all over the new Trippie Redd album. He's dating Kourtney Kardashian. So I don't know. This might be going for broke to pimp the new Blink album.
And the CBD line. I mean, everywhere I look on Twitter, it's like Travis Barker's doing this, Travis Barker's doing that. So he is trying to take the world over. Earlier last year, he did a song with Run the Jewels. Like, why not do something with them too? Like, he's got his hands in so many things, and it makes sense. I mean, he's a guy that after they got in that crash, he almost like just became a recluse and finally ended up being like, no, it means too much and sticking around in the music industry and, good for us, right?
And actually, wasn't he on that Post Malone Nirvana cover thing?
Yep. Yeah, played drums on that, yeah.
Jesus.
Early on in the pandemic.
Yeah, he's going for broke. You're right. He's unstoppable right now.
He's the Kevin Bacon of music, right? He's the 6 degrees of Travis Barker.
And how old is he? Mid-40s?
Great
I
question.
want to say, I was going to say like late 40s. Yeah. And I wonder if he's just getting all these offers and he's just kind of like, well, why the hell not? Kind of like we talked about last weekend with the Bono Etsy project. Barker's probably like a CBD line. I mean, it's really at the end of the day, just a licensee deal. I don't have any association with making CBD, you know? So why the hell not? Extra cash in the bank? Hell yeah.
He's 45
Oh, okay. Wow.
and still a monster. He's still a monster on drums too.
Yeah, like how long can he go at that pace? It's funny. I was on Facebook the other day and of old video. This is pre-Blink. Travis video came up of him playing like a outdoor birthday party or something, and he was just nasty. I mean, he's been like this for years. It was unbelievable, and he could tell like it was just like a garage band, and he was just on another level. But I wouldn't think he'd be able to do that into his 50s that fast and all that.
I don't know, man. I mean, Danny Carey's still doing it, and I think he might be close to 60.
That's true. Danny's more like complex though, and Barker's more like
Speed.
extremely fast tempo. And
Yeah.
he said in interviews that he hits harder than he needs to just to make the sound that much more vibrant.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, at that age, and he's been injured so many times. He's broken both arms, both legs, accidents, everything. Like he got hit in like he was in a car crash like 2 years ago, let alone the plane crash. So like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. You know, superhuman, I guess.
He also is complex, but it's a different. You're right. It's different than Tool drumming with Danny Carey. But I mean, this just goes to we've actually championed drummers here for a long time. We championed Dave Grohl, we championed Travis Barker, Danny Carey. I mean, the list goes on. The Patio Slave is the home for drummers. We haven't had a drummer on yet, though, have we?
Ian Robinson.
Oh, right. Yes, that's
He was
true.
the drummer
Yeah.
of Puny Human.
Yep.
And Brendan from Incendiary before his vocals days.
Oh, yeah, he is a drummer.
Oh,
but
true.
He didn't make his hay as a drummer.
No.
We want Travis Barker on. You know?
Oh,
No
man.
offense, guys. We love those guys and love what they've put out there. But yeah,
Brad Wilk was so close. Damn.
you met him. At least you got to meet him.
He's a listener, so
Damn.
we'll take that.
Well, it's still our biggest YouTube video to date is Nate telling that story. So
I think I mentioned this in group chat a while ago, is that Travis with Blink, especially on self-titled, you can actually like feel and hear how hard he hits the drums,
Yeah.
which you can't do that just with all, you can't hear that in a lot of other records and other bands and stuff, because probably just the studio tricks and whatnot. But I don't know, you can just feel it.
what's the is it Easy Target? The start of Easy Target? That's
yeah.
the drums.
Yeah,
It's just like
Yep.
him going nuts on the
like
drums.
the triplets, I think.
Dun, dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun. Yeah. That you're right. That's a perfect example.
Throw it in headphones.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think he pulled a Lars and had the production turn the volume up on the drums, because I know exactly what you mean. Like it's like showcased the whole time. They're probably like finally like, we gotta like give the credit to this guy. He really is carrying the band here. It's this guy right here. So yeah, good point.
Virtuoso.
Yes, 100%.
Totally.
Patio Slave certified virtuoso.
Yeah. Yeah, you heard it
Exactly.
here first. Travis Barker's a virtuoso. You won't get that anywhere else, guys.
Certified. There's no perks. It's just you're certified. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you got a lifetime invitation to come on.
please.
We'll drop everything and then have you on, Travis. Obviously. Twan, you ready for this?
Yeah, let's do it. What do you guys want to know?
All right, so
So do we have a name for this? Do we have a name for the...
a day in the life of a college radio metal director.
There we go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Quick,
Yeah.
quick and simple.
I mean, it'll probably be more than one day, guys, just to be honest, but that's what we're going to call it.
I'm here for it.
So I'm going to ask the first question. I got to know, you started your freshman year.
Freshman year, fall of 03.
How did that come about? Like, how did you decide you wanted to go and be on the radio right when you got to school?
I'm trying to think back. I know that like they had groups and event fairs like you see in movies. Like even in, I think like in Clueless, they have like on the quad, they have, you know, the different teams and clubs and things like that. And I think there was a table for the radio station. You know, they had you know, big PA and they're playing music. So obviously I'm drawn to that. And I think I'm trying to remember because I feel like I worked them later in my years there, but there was a lot of like CD giveaways. So obviously I'm going to go check that out.
Yeah.
So you find out this radio station and then you can go tour it. And, you know, it's small school, probably 15, probably 2,500 kids. So it's, if you want a radio show, you can get one. You might not get the time slot you want because it's typically once a week, your radio show for 3 hours. Typically, freshman to start would be deep into the morning, like a 1 to 4 slot. I think that was the first one. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, probably like a fair on the quad or something.
Nice.
And I'd never done anything like that before. It wasn't like I was like 17 when I started school, so that was the first foray into that.
That was one of my questions I'm going to ask later, actually, was that what you just brought up, but I'll save it for later. I really want to know about this interview process because obviously we're all nerds here. So I can only imagine like you going up to the booth being like, finger to the glasses, like putting them back up, like I'm the guy, like hear me out,
So a couple things. One is I started freshman year as a DJ, like with a radio show. So 4 years of that. The last 2 years, I joined the radio station board as the metal director. So like I said, to get on the radio, you really just have to have a pulse. Like there was enough spots where I don't think anyone got turned down. You might not get your first choice time slot. I think my first one was 1 to 4 a.m. And it was like,
wow.
Some night, like some weeks you're like, do I want to do it? And that's the thing is if you don't do it, there's a backing recorded cycle of music that just plays. Pre-track, exactly.
Yeah.
So do you want to know the interview process for the actual metal director?
Before we get there,
because that's a few years in.
Did you have a pulse? That's the question.
Barely.
Okay.
But yeah, there was no I think there was orientation before you started, but there was no check for any skill set. It was, you're on your own. The boundaries are obviously don't swear, which I'll get into a story about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, do they tell you what you can and can't say? Probably, right? And that's about it. Like, don't drop the F-bomb.
Exactly. You can't say it and you can't have it in. The station was FCC regulated, so you couldn't say swears and the music couldn't have swears. And I don't even think after a certain time frame late in the night, I still don't think you could.
That's the crazy thing about radio. Looking back on it now, like I always put something on from my personal collection and there's always swears or whatever, right? Like it's very rarely am I tossing the radio on nowadays, but back then that's what we did because there wasn't the streaming stuff. There wasn't the access to the music that we had. You had a CD player in your car maybe, or a tape deck in your car, but we're that old, right? I mean,
no kidding, right?
It wasn't just at your fingertips for everything, and especially not during our time in college. So that leads me to, it's 2003, you're on the radio. How big is this station? How many people are listening to you? Obviously, not many at 1 to 4 a.m., your first couple shifts, but, during the day, I'm sure there's a decent amount of people listening to that college radio station. How does that work?
So I'm smirking because that's a great question.
Thanks.
It's one that I've wanted to know myself. So small radio station, so it's 100-watt radio station, it's 100-watt antenna. So I would say probably a 10-mile diameter, so 5 miles in every direction. And the school's just south of Boston, so, decent reach, but nothing crazy. And so you got to remember, time frame 2003, the station was pretty, I don't know if I'd say dated at that point in time, but it was not technologically advanced. It was pretty much all analog. So how I would get ready for shows is, this was just when the iPod was kind of taken off, like in that time frame. So if you had an iPod, there was a like a standard 1/4-inch jack, like a headphones jack that you could plug into your MP3 player, because some people still had MP3 players. The iPod was just getting traction. But if you didn't have that, you were looking at playing CDs, and there were only 2 CD decks. So if you can imagine like there was like a server rack almost on a counter with 2 CD players, and if you didn't have a playlist, like a mixtape or whatever, you'd have to flip-flop between the CDs. So if I'm playing a song that's going out to the radio, and that song's finishing, I'm going to switch the track to the other CD player. So it almost influenced what you were going to play, because if it was a short song, you didn't have much time to get the next CD ready and like get it to the right track number, and then you'd have to fade out the end of the song that's playing and then fade into the next one if you wanted a smooth transition. What I would do is I would burn mix CDs, and that would be the playlist. But it was a lot of work. That's why you typically prefer to do it with a couple other people.
So all of those awesome fade-ins and fade-outs of music that you've heard throughout the Life of the Patio Slave podcast, that was all Twan cutting his teeth back in 2003.
Yeah, and it's crazy. Like the comment I made earlier is like how many people were listening outside of like, and this isn't even a gauge, but outside of like people calling in to make requests, I personally had no clue how many people were listening. No idea, because it wasn't like, you always see like Boston sports talk radio. They talk about the ratings and rankings. Yeah, there's nothing like that. Or if it existed, I didn't know about it, but we would get callers to request stuff, and sometimes it was like, you want that played on this show? Yeah, not
Do
gonna
you know
happen.
who we are?
Yeah, do you know who I am? But it was ancient, and I wish I'll try to dig up a picture of the soundboard. It looks like straight out of the 80s or 70s. I mean, it's old.
Wow.
And then there were some times where like the quarter-inch jack, might not work or something, so you're stuck with CDs. And there was a fair amount of the catalog of CDs in the station was pretty impressive too.
Nice.
That's crazy, man. I'm just like so curious. Like, was there any direction at all, or did you take on the role and they were like kind of like, do what you want, just make it sound good, kind of thing, or was there a template to kind of a set list to follow that you had to abide to?
Yeah, so this will kind of, we won't segue into like the whole metal director thing yet, but how it would work is there were like probably 6 different music directors, and we all aligned with like different types of music. So I eventually became the metal director, but what the metal director would do is they would basically curate almost like a recommended list. So if you had a metal show, it was lightly suggested or recommended that you at least spin a couple from that list. You weave them in. No pressure on it. No one ever followed up on it. But yeah, you could make it your own. There was very little guidance outside of don't swear, that
Play
type of
clean
thing.
versions of songs.
Right. And I have some comments on that, which will probably come up.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we get to those now. So you're hinting at it. What happened? Like you must have had an incident.
Well, yeah, we did have an incident. But basically, if you think about it, college radio stations, major labels do send stuff to college radio stations, but typically, if a college student's getting into college radio, they're probably a nerd, and they're probably maybe into more niche stuff.
Mm.
So a lot of the connections that we had at the station were from indie labels and smaller labels. Major labels have the budget to send out edited copies of CDs. Indies don't. So what would happen with a lot of the indie records is they'd come with a one sheet. You'd get a one sheet, and it would have a track list. It would give a bio of the band, where they're from, but it was recommended if you like similar artists, but it would also highlight the dirty tracks.
So we see those now in digital format and email. We have
Yes.
a couple of people
we
that
do.
send us those same exact things. So I
Exactly.
actually now know what that is. I didn't know that before we started this.
Exactly. So if you can imagine, a lot of the indie labels, they're sending out CDs with swears. They're just saying, hey, don't play, it would highlight tracks that would have swears. So you could do one of two things. You could either just pick a track that didn't have a swear. You could find a way to edit it yourself, which I never did. I didn't have any software for that. Or the trick that I would do if I wanted to play a song with a swear is I'd know where the swear came in the song, and you drop the volume down. But you'd have to time it right.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes you'd be, too aggressive with it, and you'd maybe drop it for a couple seconds just to be safe. Well, the time I'm hinting at is I had a Sunday morning radio show. It was probably 7 a.m., 10 a.m., and I played the Movie Life's Jamestown, 40-hour train back to Penn, which I think it's been on one of our playlists. And there's the lyric that says, I can't fucking believe I mistimed the volume, and it played fucking on the radio.
Nice.
No less than 30 seconds later, the general manager of the station calls in, and I'm thinking, oh, sweet, we get a request. It's him. He's like, either clean it up or don't do the show, in so few words. And I was like, oh shit. He was like, that could be $25,000 fine. And I'm like, what?
Sorry. Yeah. Did he drop any F-bombs on the phone?
When you were recording, when you were live on the air, the phone would switch to a light, so it wouldn't ring. It would just flash. But if you were think about this, if you were by yourself and you were like talking, because you'd talk between every 5 or 6 songs or whatever, you wouldn't be able to pick up the phone. That's why it was cool to have a co-host or something like that.
You know what's funny? Little plot twist here is I was one of those guys sending. I think we talked about this before. I was one of the guys sending you the bubble wrap, envelopes with the CD and the press kit and everything.
Yeah. So you were
major label. Yeah, major label, not not indie or anything like that. But we definitely had the money. Like we'd throw in like a Christmas card in there, like signed by the band, so you actually get some like nerdery, with your package and stuff like that. Tickets to a show if you want. That actually kind of brought up a question. You obviously got some perks, whether it was I don't know how much you can talk about payola, but were you getting some sweet perks out of the gig, some fringe benefits?
So what's interesting is before I became the metal director, like I said, I had a show for 2 years before, and then 2 years while I was metal director. But I remember not knowing about the relationships the station had with certain labels. I emailed when I just had a show before I was on the board and had all these connections. I would email labels. Like I remember emailing Doghouse Records and them just saying, "Hey, I have a radio show. I'd love to play, I don't know, As Friends Rust or whatever. And you think you could send me something?" And they did. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. Not knowing that the station already had a pipeline to all the labels and promotion PR companies and marketing agencies and whatnot. So like, yeah, I mean, there's definitely labels will listen if there's something in it for them. But as the metal director, yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically we had relationships with, I would say probably a dozen labels. So like Metal Blade, Prosthetic, Relapse, Death Wish, and then on like the marketing agency side, like we worked with the Syndicate. They're probably the biggest, the most well-known one because they're a PR agency or marketing agency. They represent more than just labels and whatnot. But a lot of the labels, if you go on their website, and several others. But yeah, I mean, if I wanted to go to a show in Massachusetts, like a metal show, I could probably get on the guest list. And if we wanted swag for promo or giveaways, yeah, they were all about it. As far as payola, that's as far as it went, which was probably in the legal boundaries. It wasn't like, yeah, there was no one money-gramming money or sending a MoneyGram or anything like that.
MoneyGram. Nice.
In hindsight, like a label like Prosthetic or like a Metal Blade, they're not that big. So like to have a dedicated radio rep and to press all those promotional copies was like, in hindsight, pretty impressive. Like, again, I don't know their economic situation, but it was pretty cool actually from that perspective.
I would think back then the cost for all that would be nuts compared to today, where you've got one person just firing off email after email after email to people saying, here's click on this link, type in this password, you got the track, play it if you want, type of thing. Where back then you needed a CD or you needed some sort of apparatus to play those songs. The digital age has certainly made that easier for, I guess, those situations, but probably more difficult for the job, because if I would imagine a job that took 3 or 4 people back then is now done by one person at those record labels.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, because there was no like emailing of like new tracks. It was all physical media. It was all CDs, and I think we kind of touched upon this with Jason Tate, where he used to get
mailroom.
the mailroom stuff, and like I mean, I don't even know how people got I know how people got the address and whatnot, but like we would get a lot of demo CDs from bands themselves, or we would get, a lot of CDs and whatnot from those labels I just mentioned or the marketing agencies. But sometimes you'd get swag too. Like you just get like, I remember, I still have it. I have a signed As I Lay Dying poster that was made out to me, which was kind of cool. And then the band signed a few others for giveaways.
That's awesome. You can probably speak to this just on the topic of economics. I mean, just at the label I was at, and that's this time frame you're talking about, 03 to 07, like CDs being like in jewel cases, the whole nine, not necessarily like shrink wrapped, but that was like the single we'd send out, to like eventually going to like CDR and like a paper sleeve. You know what I mean? Cost being cut because literally industry was crashing at the time. So you probably saw that firsthand, kind of that transition.
Oh, totally. No, there were a lot sent in the, like the paper sleeve with the almost like the clear cello, see through, the whole plastic thing. Yeah, there was a fair amount of that. But then on the other end of the spectrum, there were a lot of CD singles with a lot of the major labels. Actually, this feeds right into that. A lot of the labels with the big backing would send CD singles, and then they'd have those, with clean versions too, where like the indies couldn't keep up with that. But it made for a lot of mail. Like, I don't know if I mentioned this on the Tate interview, but I would have to go to the mailroom 2 or 3 times a week. And you know those USPS postal service bins?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say 7 or 8 of those a week I'd get full of
Wow.
CDs. Yeah,
Just on the metal side?
just on the metal side. And the
Wow.
mailroom used to hassle like me because I couldn't go every day. So you'd go like twice a week, and you need to bring a couple buddies, and sometimes it would pile up, and I'd have to sift through. And it was always cool, like when you'd get a CD you were anticipating, but you'd have to sift through a lot of bull crap.
That's crazy. And I could see it's another college kid working in the mailroom to pay off their tuition. And they're like, hey, asshole college kid, come pick up your CDs.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Nate, you said something that jogged my memory. I have we talked about Phoenix TX a few episodes back, and I have a Phoenix TX CD that's written out Lechuza. It's the album Lechuza that was given as a promo to, I think, Rob from CYY, who knows when. And he gave it to me because I was a fan. And it's like that. It's got the piece of paper and it's a CDR. And it's like that's the copy of Phoenix TX's Lechuza that I own.
Which is so funny because it's almost like a hypocrisy to the industry. It's like they're burning CDs.
Well, and they were on MCA, I think. Like they were
big at that point.
They were big, yeah.
All right, so you've hinted a little bit. You were metal director. How did you get the metal director job? Tell us about your interview.
Yeah, so up to that point, I was doing a radio show for a couple of years, and I did it with, I think 1 year was one other buddy, and then another year was 2 other buddies. So I was kind of in the farm system or whatever, and the guy that was a metal director, I became friends with because there's only so many people into that style of music, and then you take that subset of people into that style of music, and then you factor in the fact that, you know, we're both, he was a DJ too, so it's like, all right, we're going to be friends. So he was graduating, going into my junior year. So I was like, you know what, he's told me about it. I want to get into it. So there was a formal interview process where you applied, and they formalized it too, probably to give you experience of like interviewing and whatnot. Because I was 19 or whatever.
I was gonna say, was this your first ever real interview?
One of them, yeah, I'm sure one of them. So I remember you had to. I'm trying to think. There was a formal like application you had to fill out, but then there was an interview process, and the interview process was like, imagine a big boardroom. Like have you seen those clips online of like MGK standing on the boardroom table at the label like rocking out?
Yeah.
You've seen those?
Yep.
Yeah, like imagine that. It was like, you know, official interview with like the board at the time was just 10, 12 people. So I'm like a 19-year-old kid. I'm nervous as hell. I don't know what they're going to ask me. So the first question they asked me is, I'm going to set the stage here. You guys remember AOL Instant Messenger?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Do you remember a feature called Direct Connect?
No.
Vaguely.
If you direct connected with someone, you could send and receive files through AIM. And there was some fancy feature where you could set up like a folder for people to access different files that you wanted to make accessible. So I don't know. Happened like the night before the interview. The guy that was eventually going to take the metal director's job, he was like, "Hey, the GM of the station upload." This allegedly happened. He would upload new CDs to this folder, and he would encourage people that had radio shows on the station to access, new CDs or whatever. So I didn't know him. So my buddy that was the metal director gave me his screen name. So I direct connected to this guy, looked through the files that he had out for sharing, and I think I downloaded either it was an Against Me or Anti-Flag CD. I thought that was the end of it. So in this interview, this guy totally joking around, and I thought it was serious. He goes, "So let me ask you this. Why did you download an Anti-Flag CD from my collection?" And I was like, "I didn't, wait, what, you could tell?" I had no idea they could see that.
Wow.
Yeah, no idea. And I like probably put me on tilt for the whole interview.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. You're just like, dude.
Like put me on the spot. Like I thought he was kind of joking around, but like, why'd you go into my stuff and take that? It's like, it was public. I don't know. But that allegedly happened. But the other, this is the best part of the interview. One of the questions, and ironically, this didn't come from the acting metal director at the time. This came from, I think, the GM again. He goes, "So you don't look like a metal guy, but maybe, you can convince me. Give me your best death metal growl." And I'm this like shy 19-year-old kid who doesn't look like and act like I'd be into that music or whatever. And I'm like, ha ha ha, good one. And like, he's like, no, like this is part of the interview. We're going to ask everyone this. I'm like, okay. So I did it. And everyone laughed.
Left or laughed?
Laughed.
Is there
Not left, laughed.
Was this interview recorded? Because I gotta hear that.
I know,
No, you're
man.
not
This
getting
is,
it
like, the
tonight.
best.
Oh, come on.
Definitely not getting it tonight.
All right.
But no, they that was apparently part of the the interview.
So when you say this was one of your first interviews, it really wasn't, because you had. I'm guessing you never have been asked to growl again
No.
in an interview.
In my professional career, no, definitely not.
Yeah.
In hindsight, it was like, it's funny, I guess. In the moment, I was like embarrassed and like, all right, can this interview be over with? Like, did I get it or not, people?
At that age, I would have been like, dude, what? Where am I? Who are you? Is this you're legitimately asking me, a junior in college, to growl at you to get a job? This is ridiculous.
That's freaking sweet. I mean, it's kind of a microcosm of nerds, right? So the way you painted that picture is so accurate. It's like, that's the only career where there would be something like that. It's like a casting couch for nerdy. Like, okay, do your growl. It's like, okay.
Exactly.
It kind of led me to a next question, because at this point you're in the role, director officially. So you're doing interviews at this point, right? You're doing interviews with bands and stuff.
Yeah, I would say I probably did, in the 2 years as the director, about 6 interviews. And to be honest with you, the reason I didn't do more was on me, because it was kind of a logistics challenge, because it was in Massachusetts, so a lot of bands do come through, but like, we were a half hour outside of Boston. So if a band had a gig in Boston, like, to get to the station and get back to the gig, things like that, logistically a challenge. 1, 2, I could go if the band had a show, to go interview them on site, but then it's like the equipment, you got to remember the time period. It's not like there's a Zoom H6 like we used to record this podcast,
Or just your iPhone.
Yeah, or even the iPhone. Although I did get, no, that wasn't then. No, I was gonna say I did get a microphone attachment for the iPhone, but iPhone hadn't come out yet. No, so it was a logistical challenge. But I could get, honestly, any interview from any band on any of those labels I mentioned, pretty much at the drop of a hat. Like if I wanted to coordinate it. So how I did the interviews, I had one of those like personal recorders.
Wow.
And so like I interviewed Henka, the bassist of Children of Bodom. They played a show at the Worcester Palladium with Amon Amarth, the Viking metal band. So I went backstage and interviewed Henka, recorded it on the microphone, and then I'm trying to think of how I got it back in digital form and then played it over the radio on the radio show. But yeah, it was just like logistical challenge, because there's no Zoom. There's nothing like we're doing now to record it. But yeah, you could get, I'm trying to think of who I got. I got Carl Buechner of Earth Crisis, Trevor Phipps, the vocalist of Unearth on Metal Blade. They were a big Ozfest band for a little bit. Luke from Sense the Flood, another Metal Blade band, and a couple others. I do wish I did more of it, but the technology sucked.
Yeah, it sounds like the technology was not conducive to making that an easy task.
No, and you couldn't do it live. Like, you couldn't pipe them into the station. There was no way to do that. Like, on talk radio, like, first time, long time listener, there's none of that.
Right.
You couldn't pipe them in. So you were left to your own devices, and unfortunately those devices were ancient.
It's probably a good thing that there was none of that, because I know you mentioned your Sunday morning show. I listened. I would have called in and razzed you. Like, it,
Yeah.
we would have totally messed with you.
Actually, that's a good point. We had a hyperlink where people could stream the station, which in hindsight, I mean, that was in 2003. I'm shocked that even existed.
It worked too, because I listened to it in Maine.
Did I sound like I knew what I was doing? Probably not.
I mean, you were doing something I wasn't doing and was jealous of. So I was like, damn, this is awesome that Twan's doing this. And he's got a couple buddies there, it sounds like, and they're really into what they're doing. So for me, it was cool. It was like, this is something that I want to be doing, and I don't. And now I'm like, man, I wish I could do that. So obviously doing it now with you guys this way is different, but cool and similar to that. But it took me another, 16 years to get there.
But Nate, it was kind of like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Like, you eat as much as you want, or you don't eat much at all. Like, I know some of the other music directors, I don't even know if they did interviews at all. But again, I was a nerd. Like that's why I wanted that job. I wanted to get the interviews. I wanted to go to the shows, all that stuff. So it was there if you wanted it. The other thing we did was we would work with our contacts at the labels to get station IDs. So if I remember who would we have? A guy from With Honor. He and how this shows you the technology. How I recorded the station IDs, we had them leave voicemails on the station voicemail. So I'd have to record the station ID from the voice answering machine. You can imagine that? Like that always doesn't sound good. And then we did have a guy that worked at the station that his job was to like edit if you wanted to edit things like that. So he spliced in like a band's music, the station ID, then fade out to the band's music. And that was kind of cool. We had a guy, I think, from the Red Chord, a Metal Blade. We had With Honor, who was on Victory, and then Stillborn before that. But that was kind of cool too. And like that was all coordinated by me, and you could do as much of that as you wanted. Like you were the boss.
Wow. So there really wasn't any template. There wasn't like, hey, you have to do like at least 4 interviews a month or anything.
No.
Like that. That's
No.
awesome. Strictly for the nerd. Which actually brings me to my next question. Seems like you were kind of going above and beyond on all fronts, which makes sense. We're all buddies here. We all know that we're in it for just the reason to nerd all together. But was there any moment when you were doing this, you were like, man, I could see myself doing this long term, or was it never really a long term vision, just kind of something for the time?
I would say it definitely scratched an itch, and I knew that I wanted to do something related or adjacent. And I did. I actually started a fanzine, which I sent you a copy, Nate.
Yep.
Back in 2007, which I actually transcribed the interviews that I did in college and printed them. So like the Carl Buechner interview and the Luke from Sense the Flood interview is in that zine, Gilded City fanzine. I just did one issue of it, but yeah, no, I mean it scratched an itch, and if I didn't do the radio show, maybe I would have done something else to like have that outlet above and beyond listening to music, going to shows, buying merch. So basically nothing's changed in 20 years is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I showed you guys yesterday or 2 days ago, Facebook is notorious for those on this day, memory things. And Nate had sent something to me in 2009 regarding starting this podcast. So
amazing.
Where we all had that, like, let's do something. Let's talk about this shit. Let's be present in it. So it makes sense. I mean, that's why we're still doing it today.
And it, yeah, I mean, we joke about it a lot on this podcast. We're like music nerds. We would be doing something if it wasn't this podcast. We'd be doing something like tonight. If we weren't doing this podcast, I'd probably be scouring the net for a band I've never listened to before, or something like that. So we've always had it, but I think we're a unique breed collectively.
Yeah.
And we have the receipts to prove it with all this, everything we just talked about.
Yeah. And I think you and I especially kind of dabbled enough to get 2 sides of it, like the fan base, but also a little bit of industry without making it a career and maybe even tainting that whole experience. So I think we both did it right, like kind of dip our toe, but not necessarily go down that path. Like,
yeah,
both in the same time frame too, which is kind of neat.
I'm shocked I never did, to tell you guys the truth. Like, I went to shows, I hung out adjacently to people in the industry here and there, but never dipped my toe in. I know at one point there was an offer to do some street team stuff and like maybe get a part-time gig at CYY back in the day, but it just didn't. I was in the middle of my college situation as well, and on top of what I did for classes, my free time was spent doing clinical rotations, so I was pretty busy. Had I not been doing that and just in class, I probably would have done it. But most of my semesters, I was doing an extra 150 to 300 hours off campus at a school somewhere learning.
Nerd in a different way.
Yeah. I could tell you what's wrong with your elbow if you ask, but.
So Nate, you talked about like fringe benefits or like the perks or whatever. Yeah, you could get an interview within reason. Like I wasn't getting like Tom Araya from Slayer interviews, although like when they have a new release, we would get those CDs, but within reason, you could get interviews, you could get on shows in Massachusetts, if bands came around and it was a band from the label that we interact with. Although I do have a couple negative stories with being on guest lists but not actually being on guest lists, and I don't think it was intentional. I think it was just miscommunication or someone dropped the ball. I'll give you two examples. One is this must have been 2006. Slipknot playing Club Tour. They played the Worcester Palladium. Openers Unearth and As I Lay Dying. Both Unearth and As I Lay Dying were on Metal Blade. So we had a relationship with Metal Blade. They supposedly put me on the guest list for the show, which obviously sold out. I drive an hour, get there. I'm not on the guest list. I can't get in touch with the radio rep. I don't want to pay the $200 to get in. I'm a broke college kid for the secondary market. So I drove home. I didn't go.
Man.
Damn. Yeah,
And at
huge
that
bummer.
point, they were not an arena band, but they were probably,
they were on their way.
I mean, they would have been playing the Centrum in Worcester at that point in time.
Slipknot, you're talking about?
Slipknot.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No, they're doing arenas because that was for Subliminal Versus, like the club show leading up to
Yep. Exactly.
the regular leg. Because I saw them on that regular leg, and it was Slipknot, Lamb of God, and Shadows Fall at Songs Arena. So yeah, that makes
There you
sense.
go.
Yeah. Ah, man, show regret. Fuck.
Well, that one wasn't his fault, at least.
I know exactly.
And then the other one was going to see Terror up at the Cave in Bucksport in Maine. So Terror at that point in time was on Trustkill, and then I think Trustkill, I don't know if they were a subsidiary of a bigger label or not at that point in time, but they used, I think it was the Syndicate for their PR and promotion. So I was supposed to be on the guest list there. I get there, I'm not on the guest list. The woman that runs the Cave, super nice person. She goes, you know what? Let me check with the band. So I'm like,
Yeah, right.
you know, like Terror, intimidating dudes.
Kid
when
is
you're,
outside. He's like, "Can I get in? I'm supposed to be on the list."
you
Like,
know,
yeah,
so and so
okay.
from the Syndicate. She's like, the Syndicate, is that a band? I'm like, no, it's a PR company. She's like, all right, what the hell is this all about? So the band comes out, and I'm intimidated. I'm like 18, 19. It's in like 2005, and they're like, I'm like, yeah, you know, I work at college radio. So and so from the Syndicate. Paused for a little bit, and I'm like, and then I think one of them was like, oh yeah, you're good, and I'm like, oh okay, sweet.
So you made
With
it
the
in that.
band.
Yeah.
I'm with the band.
I'm with the band. I'm on the guest list, motherfucker.
Little tangent nerdery on this. And part of it, especially the nerdery-esque, is just seeing the backstage at these venues, right?
Yeah, actually, it didn't happen much, but the Palladium, like I said, I did that interview with Henka, bassist, Children of Bodom, and I think it was, I'm trying to think, I think it was like upstairs. Like you went upstairs, and like it's dark, it's grimy. And I remember this kind of weird nerdery thing. I interviewed him like on this couch, and the couch was like a foot from the ground. It was just kind of a weird thing. And, you know, and I have one mic, and we're passing it back and forth. It just, I don't know, wasn't the right equipment for it, but that was a cool thing.
That sounds like backstage at the State Theater.
I think very close. Yep.
Very
Similar,
similar.
yeah.
It's upstairs. There's like old couches, and they're all barely off the ground. And
They're
yeah,
grimy
I've been
as
back there
hell.
a couple times with Rob, and it just feels like, because that's an old building too, right? The Palladium's old.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's been around a while. It's similar to the State Theater. It's an old staple in Maine, in Portland, Maine. So yeah, that's what that feels like. And it's cool when you get to see that shit, because it doesn't happen every day.
So Nate, like above and beyond obviously there was the perks, you know, the relationships with the bands if you wanted it, all that stuff. But you actually, as the metal director, what your job was to basically schedule the metal programs or like heavier music, make sure the shows are scheduled, but also you own the pipeline of new music coming into the station. So that's why all the metal directors before me had basically a pipeline with labels. Like I said, Metal Blade, Prosthetic, Victory was another one. And then there were tons of labels, dozens and dozens that were represented by these marketing agencies. So what I would do is I would have weekly office hours, and all the label reps would know that. So they would know to call in. I think it was like 3 or 4 hours a
When you
week.
were there.
Call in when I was there. And they'd it was kind of like the road show. Like they would pitch, you know, they got this new band coming out, you know, send you it, recommend it if you like. You know, we really hope you chart it. And that's another thing I'll talk about here in a little bit, that element of it. And then you would, what I would do is I would have basically a cheat sheet for our metal shows at the station where I would do little review and write up of all the new stuff. Like I might put every month, I might have like 40 new CDs where I would say like recommended tracks, recommended if you like Slayer, you'll love, I don't know, whatever. Or if you like grindcore, you might like this or whatever, that type of thing. So it was a cool way to keep a pulse on what was going on. And like I still remember a lot of even the people's names at the labels. In fact, the guy at Victory was moving on, and he was like, "Dude, do you want my job?" I'm like, "I don't want to live in Chicago. Like, I don't want to."
That's a great glimpse of like the corporate world, little dip your toe and see what it's like, especially have people calling you as a college student like, yeah, you might get my time of day.
Exactly. No, totally. And like you had the leverage. Like it was just a rare thing for a young kid to have the leverage where like, hey, can you send a few copies? We'd love to do some giveaways. Yeah, sure. Send them. Hey, can we get some merch? Send them. Yeah.
And you probably knew you had it, but didn't know to what level
Right.
for some of that thing, like that stuff. So like you could have, like you said, you could have probably had more interviews. You could have had more maybe merch and CDs and stuff like that come through the door just because you play the game a little differently. But I know you, and you're not looking to take advantage of anybody. That's not your style. So I get why that, and I would be the same way. I'd be like, do I call them and ask them for more stuff? Like, I'm not even sure if that's okay. They sent me this already. Like, I already have these 3
Right.
CDs. I really need that too. I do the same thing, but at the same time, looking at it now through our lens of doing this and what we've been able to accomplish in just 52 weeks, you get people on by asking and knocking on doors and banging on doors, and then they say yes. So not everybody, but do it to enough people, you're going to get a couple, and that's where you cut your teeth with that stuff.
You know what it gave me a glimpse into? Kind of piggybacking on what you just said, but it gave me a glimpse into when a band signs with a label, you kind of do sell your soul. Because like if I wanted, as a college kid within a small radio station with a 10-mile radius reach, if I wanted an interview, good chance I was going to get it. So if you can imagine like a band, like they might be on the road, they're like, there's an obligation to fulfill this. And it's like, that's a weird thing. That's why we've always said like on this podcast, like we want to interview people that like are down for it, like that want to have a conversation, and we've lucked out, you know what I mean? But it's a weird dynamic where if a band's on a label, especially a major, where it's like the intent is to move units.
Yeah. And I just was thinking about this whole interesting like little middle ground that you're talking about with this radio gig is the fact that there was no pressure. So it's kind of the best case scenario for radio because you're actually, like you said, those recommendations are legitimate. They're nerdy. They're, tried and true. There's no agenda behind the scenes for you to be like, hey, recommend this because it's going to, like you said, move units. And there's a little soulless in that sense. So I think you kind of got that sweet spot of like, you're doing it for the right reasons. And unfortunately, it's not how it works in the majors, but there's that little like sweet spot in between major and, nothing that you can do that at the time. Like now we're doing podcasting and, you can kind of just say whatever you want now, which is great.
To an extent.
But that's cool. Yeah, it's cool that you captured that.
And you also got to do what Nate's saying, I think, for me, is there is no pushy play this song. You have to play this song 3 times in your shift. You're on for 4 hours. It needs to come up at least 3 times. That didn't happen. We've heard, some of the smaller rock radio stations that we grew up with, that was maybe the case a little bit. And not just rock radio, everybody. I mean, you listen to pop radio, you're hearing the same 6 songs all day. So there was obviously a play the song a bunch of times. We have been kind of beholden to that. Where at the college, the indie radio station, like you were at, college radio, you don't have to do that per se. So it's probably a little more freeing to be able to play, as long as it doesn't have the F-bomb in it, play whatever you want.
Oh, definitely. No, totally. There was no pressure from our college radio station, you know what I mean, from like the general manager or anything like that. Like you curated your own music. I will say this though, the most pushy of the contacts that I had were ones that were from the PR agencies or the marketing agencies, like the Metal Blades, the Relapses. They're music nerds. Like there's not a lot of money in that. Like they're in it for the love of the game, and like they'll, you know, they got to know me and know like the style of the station and whatnot. So they would push certain albums, but it was like the marketing agencies that were really pushy, where it's like, hey man, we got this new Queensryche album. You got to throw it on. Your listeners will love it. It's like, dude,
You're like, what?
you know, read a room, man.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's for us. No. It's like, all right. So that's just a little glimpse of probably what happens with the big boy stage at like actual radio stations, and then obviously the whole payola thing. But no, you could do kind of whatever you wanted.
And Nate, you and I through Rob have met a few of those people, those reps that are like, hey, I'm gonna come up, hang out. I got a band I want to talk to you about, but I'm not gonna push it. Like those ones are always fun.
Yeah.
But then there were ones that didn't come up and didn't make that effort to like connect with the DJ or connect with the radio station. And it was just, hey, play the song, deal with it, play the song, play the song, play the song. So that was cool to see some of the people that did that, you know, humanely, friendly.
Totally.
Yeah. And like Twan said, there's so many variables to that, you know, like budget wise, like Interscope rep. They're pretty solid. So it's like, hey, go up there, hang out, buy everyone dinner, you know, sweet gig, right? If you're like anything below that, you're kind of like hoping you can even get a meeting or like get them to come to lunch with you, let alone like play the song. And what you're saying, Twan, is like basically the Nielsen scan, right? Like you need to see those spins in order for a PR agency to have the data to be like, hey, there is an ROI on working with us, basically. And we've dealt with that even here at Audio Slave, like working with agencies saying, hey, is it going to be mutually beneficial? So it's cool to see that come full circle. Man, I got to ask, this is kind of off the cuff a little bit, but I think we both agree, and I think all listeners will agree too, that you definitely have the radio voice. I think out of us three, is this something that developed from this gig? Was it before? Did you know, like you were like, I think I can do radio, or was it something that developed like in your tenure there?
See, I don't think I have a radio voice. I think this is.
You totally did, man.
You think so?
It's not a bad thing though.
So here's the thing:
it actually sounds.
I don't remember what I sounded like back then, and I don't think it was this. I think I was like too young and not aware of even what I sounded like. I think we probably just sounded like idiots. We didn't even have a name. Like I don't even think we had a name of the show. Like how unaware can you be? I think we just, hey, it's Anthony here. Here's a movie life. You know, it's
so like our first episodes, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, I listened. It did sound like that. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
I remember, and I was like, "This is cool." I'm listening to my boy down in Mass play his radio show.
As fun as it was to be on the air, it was just as fun to like curate music, because like it was definitely in that punk, hardcore, metal and adjacent lane. Like basically everything that you heard on the New York, Long Island, New York episode. But it's funny, Nate, you mentioned something about Nielsen ratings, which reminded me one of the responsibilities of all the music directors was to submit CMJ charts. So CMJ, if you're not familiar, it's the College Music Journal or College Media Journal. It's basically the billboard of college radio. Every week, all the music directors would have to submit, and I was trying to think of this today. I'm not sure if it was the top 10 albums that were spun for the genre or top 10 songs. It must have been the songs. Top 10 songs in the metal, like, because I filled it out for metal or hard rock or whatever it was. You submitted the top 10, and you would. So that's what like a lot of the radio reps were looking for. It's like for you to chart their band. And here's the funny thing is, there were no spins metrics associated with it. So like our top 10, I think, was as valuable as like Emerson Radio. You know, Emerson College Radio is known for radio. I'm pretty sure that's how it worked. But
BU, Boston University.
Yeah, like don't quote me on that, but I think that's how it worked. But one of the perks with working with CMJ was their annual music festival.
In New York City?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
So you know about this, right?
Yep.
The CMJ Music Marathon. So it happened every year in New York. I went in 2005, and the best way to think about it is imagine a music festival that's across the whole city, which
That's cool.
I was thinking about it today. New York's so active that like there were probably shows at all these venues regardless of the festival, but it was like a big deal. And if you got like a CMJ pass, which they gave them a certain amount. They gave a certain amount to every college radio station. So I remember I got one 2005, and I did some digging. And one night I went to 3 shows. The first night I went to 2 shows. I saw Black Alicious at Webster Hall.
Nice.
And this was when he was promoting the album with rhythm sticks. And they handed out these like glow in the dark, like rhythm sticks or whatever. I
Do
don't
you
know.
still have those?
I don't have it.
Ah,
And then that same night over at the Bowery, I saw the Saddle Creek Showcase, like Cursive, Two Gallants, a few others. And then the next night was the Hold Steady at CBGB's.
Nice.
And then I don't think many people know this, and I've probably talked about it on the podcast. CBGB's has a basement that
Yeah.
they had music at.
you were at 2 shows in the same place, right?
Yeah. So I remember, I think the Hold Steady finished, and I went downstairs to see Sense by Man, who was on Revelation Records, and the band Curl Up and Die. They were down there, and it's like this grimy, dingy. I'm surprised there weren't like rats down there. Did you ever go to that, Nate? The downstairs CB's?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Oh, you did?
All these venues you're talking about, they're all pretty grimy. Even Webster Hall is pretty grimy.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
that same night, late night, we went to see Torch. Are you guys familiar with Torch?
No.
No.
If you like, I mean, it's not a direct parallel, but if you're into Queens, Torch is like a stoner, doomy, sludgy.
Like The Sword, maybe?
Yeah. Or like, who's the band that the dude from Thrice recommended, Tone?
Oh, Saren.
Saren. Kind of like Saren. Yeah. Kind of like that. At this venue called Tonic, Nate. You remember Tonic?
Nice. Yep.
Yeah. And that was like the loudest show, probably one of the loudest shows I've ever been to. But like, it was I don't know, like Coachella in New York for nerds.
It's funny. I you said that, and it made me think. This was CMJ
CMJ.
puts on this festival in New York where shows are happening anyway, right? Like that's what you said. That's like Budweiser saying we're doing a tap takeover at a very densely populated bar, bunch of bars, right? Like,
Right.
hey, we're doing a tap takeover. We're at Foreplay and the Bullfini's and all these bars downtown. Come on down. Like those were there anyway, dude.
Analogy.
What taps are you taking over?
That's perfect.
You're the new analogy king right here. Damn.
Did I just take over? Nice.
Yeah. Twan, it's like, I'm so happy you brought that up because I hadn't thought about that in a long time, but you're exactly right. And I think that's on point because that's the way I saw it. I was like, wow, this is a festival, but like at pretty much every cool venue in basically Manhattan. I don't think it actually went to the other boroughs, but it was awesome, man. It was like 5 days, right? Or was it 3? You said 3? Might have changed over time.
I think it was 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Because I just have shows from 2 nights.
Yeah. But like you said, there was already music, but because it was specific to CMJ, it was almost like comparing it to like, this is not a good analogy, like yours Tone, but like these Salesforce like trade show where like it's just decked out and everyone's there to party and it's like you're just bouncing from spot to spot. That's what I kind of associated with. That was a good time.
So I still have my lanyard because that was like I'm pretty sure that was your ticket, the lanyard.
Yep.
We'll toss it in a story on IG or something.
Might even be part of the what did we call it last week or 2 weeks
The
ago?
photo companion.
Photo companion. Yeah, we have some
Yeah.
photos, especially when it's something that we have a bunch of photos of. I don't know if we'll do that every week, but when we can kind of draw from the archives a little bit more, you'll see some of the cool shit that we've hung on to. All right, so any odds and ends that we didn't get to that you wanted to bring up, Twan?
I don't know. One thing, not necessarily from my experience, but just like I was just thinking about if I was a college kid now, like would I go the podcast route or would I go like the college radio route? And I know they're different. Like one you play music and one you talk about it, but I'm trying to think if I don't know. I did enjoy it. It opened my eyes to the music industry. You know, I'm not in contact with anyone. Actually, Andrew from Victory, I still converse with online a little bit, but I really enjoyed the experience, and not even for the perks, but the perks are just a bonus. I mean, I had a direct pipeline to new music in the heavy music space, which was like a dream for me. If you're a music nerd, I couldn't recommend it more. And you don't have to be talented at all. I mean,
You need a pulse and you don't swear, right?
Yeah, exactly. No swearing. Got a pulse, you're hired. And I'm sure it's more competitive at a bigger school. There's only so many hours in a day for radio shows, and especially for the hours that people are actually listening. But I would definitely recommend it. But as far as like stories or anything else, I think we got to most of the ones that stand out. And no, I'm not going to do my death metal growl. Sorry.
Damn.
You sure we can't make it like the secret song on this episode?
So maybe if we can figure it out. In college, we had a improv grindcore death metal adjacent band called Cat Dissection, which is kind of a joke. It was definitely a joke. And I may or may not.
Yeah, I'm glad it wasn't kind of a joke.
Allegedly, I may have been on vocals, and allegedly there may be a recording.
Well, someday that may see the light of day, and maybe you have some of your interviews on tape somewhere too, because you had that recorder.
Oh God, they do exist, but we
then
will not be
could,
hearing
we
them.
We could edit those though. We could make those a little cleaner, I'm sure. and
Audio
put those
Slave
out to the world.
B-sides.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. We are a treasure trove here at Audio Slave. We have so many things that we haven't even scratched the surface on. This was something that just kind of came to us last week. Wanted to know more about Twan's time in college radio and being a metal director. So Anthony, thank you for coming on tonight. Much appreciated.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's awesome. I really, really appreciate this time. I know it's turning it to behind the music, behind the pod. And I wanted to end it with a Peter Thiel question. You ready for this?
Is it for me?
Yeah, it's
not for
you.
me, I don't think. Yeah.
What very important truth do very few people agree with you on in regards to the music industry?
Wow.
I'm not even sure I understand the question. I would say something I disagree with or agree with.
A very important truth that very few people agree with you on in regards to the music industry. Like there's a
thing you've noticed
stigma.
that not a lot of people have.
Yeah,
yes.
I would say through the experience of doing the radio, and I don't think we really see it necessarily doing the podcast, but like the industry is cutthroat, and I saw like a very sliver glimpse of it with like some of the PR companies where like they weren't trying to hustle you to play stuff, but like they were putting the full court press on as much as they could. None of those labels, I'll say this, none of those labels I mentioned ever did anything like that. But like some of the PR companies that represented majors, go figure, never payola, nothing like that. But just like, you should really, you guys will love this. You know what I mean? I mean, they're doing their job, I guess.
Yeah.
And I was just a glimpse of that. I can't imagine working for a big radio station where, there's behind the back deals going on, backdoor deals and things like that.
Pulled in a million directions
Yeah.
to do interviews and talk to whoever and go to these places and yeah.
At least one thing I appreciate, I guess, about this podcast is like no one's come on for guests that everyone's wanted to come on. Where with the radio gig, it's like there's a label kind of forcing the hand to say, hey, we signed you, we're promoting the hell out of you, now live up to your end of the bargain. But I think collectively I'd say it's pretty cutthroat, and especially back then where there's money behind it.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks again for coming on tonight, Twan. We really appreciate you and your insight into college radio and all your time, and hopefully you'll be back with us next week.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Awesome. Valuable insight. Appreciate you, man. Cheers all.
Peace, podheads.
See you guys next week.